It's Eric and Ashley here.
Hello, hello.
Happy New Year.
Friday.
Yes, it's Friday, and also it is the end of the first week of National Diet Month. So I want to talk a little bit about that and have Ashley chime in. I've been seeing people already struggling with accepting that diets don't work and really kind of wondering what do they do now, what do they do next. And I will say the answer is the non-diet, because we know diets don't work. So the non-diet is something called intuitive eating. And it really means starting to pay attention to your body, recognizing signs of hunger and fullness. But the first thing is to really not diet. So I'm going to ask Ashley to pop in and just comment a little bit on not dieting, what that does, how that
Yeah.
improves health.
I think that really not dieting is about not restricting, right? So, because dieting is sort of like a socially acceptable form of restriction. And when we do that, our body thinks that we're about to enter a famine. And we have a lot of biological mechanisms that kick in, which they're really there to help us live in case there is a famine. But obviously that's not actually what's happening. And so, your body will slow down your metabolism, it will reroute energy, and basically will do everything it can to hold on to your weight, as well as urge you to seek out food, specifically energy dense foods like carbs, starch, and sugars.
Can I just put a little something in here, which is that every time I work with someone and they tell me that they can't eat a certain food, they've tried everything, they've been on every diet, but they always end up in the pantry, they always end up, with their spoon in the ice cream or grabbing chips or whatever. And those are the highly palatable foods we're talking about that your body is seeking to nourish you and to provide instant energy. So it's actually kind of genius. Your body's really smart.
It is, and I think that's one of the big shifts that I had to make with myself when I was going through this process of understanding that, like, I wasn't meant to be angry with my body because it was urging me to eat in the way that diet culture encourages us to be, right? But instead, I should be marveling at the fact that, like, holy shit, my body is so smart that when it thinks I'm not getting enough food, it does everything it can to nourish me in the best way it knows how.
That is so true. I heard yesterday from someone who was really worried that they were binging. And what was so interesting is they were not binging. Their body was really had been restricted severely. This person actually had a disordered eating. And their body was so brilliant that they said, no more, no more. Go find the chips. Go find the bread. And again, it's your body's way of saving you. Body doesn't want to starve and die.
Right. I think that, yes, that person was binging. It's just that they were binging for a reason. Like, I think when we think about binge eating disorder, like, I think that it's really important that we acknowledge that restriction is a part of it. We binge for many reasons, and one of them is physical, right? A lot of
Absolutely.
people seek out food as emotional comfort, but why do we have an emotional relationship with food in the first place? Yes, there's this aspect of food that is meant to sort of be pleasurable and nourishing more in the spiritual sense and like in your soul. But you know, when it becomes sort of excessive, what is that about? That's more about diet culture than it is about you being out of control or emotionally eating, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? I wanted to say that the restriction doesn't always mean physical restriction.
Right.
Because even when you feel psychologically deprived, you're not eating something that feels satiated or satisfying, you're going to end up wanting the thing that you've deprived yourself of.
Definitely. And
Yeah,
I also think it's important to point out, so not only can restriction be both physical and mental, but also we often underestimate how much food we actually need because we live in diet culture.
hmm
So a lot of times, like, even if you think you're eating enough, honestly, if you're still in recovery or you're still kind of learning your hunger and fullness signals, you're still kind of figuring out how to reject the diet mentality, you're probably still not eating enough.
This is such a good point. I think that people have in their heads this magic number, these ideas that they've heard, and it is diet culture. It's from everything that you hear on television, on the, even what you look at on the internet, because you have to be really careful what sites you look at, and who has the information as to what a female actually needs to be, at a healthy place. Yeah. The fact is, everyone needs a different amount of food. Everyone's body is meant to be a different shape and size. And it's so incredibly personal what your body needs, even from day to day, depending on levels of physical activity, depending on seasons, absolutely. Emotions. I mean, there's just so many factors, amount of sleep.
Well, right, because, calories, it's like there's this idea, it's calories in, calories out, right? And it's an idea I ascribed to religiously, that was my in, right?
Listen, that's what we all learned. That's what I learned in school. Right. Calories in, calories out, but it's a lie.
But it's so much more complicated than that. And not only is it more complicated than calories in, calories out, but the way that we calculate that stuff isn't even accurate. Like, it's not true.
I have to just tell you something. I despise calorie counting. I'm going to make a point about that, which is why when people come to me and they've been counting calories, counting points, counting macros, it's just physically exhausting. It's exhausting, and they're not exact. When I would look at something, a label, oops, that just get in the way. If I would look at a food label and it would have a certain number of calories, it's really just energy, the amount of energy a food provides. But it's not accurate. It can be off by 10 to 20 or even more percentage points. So, whatever people have, it's a sort of a false sense of security in their head that they're eating this certain amount of food.
Yeah, the only I guess control you have is that you're eating less than you need.
Good point.
Which is a what's the word I'm looking for? That is not alluring.
Well, a false sense of control?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a false sense of control, but it's something that is tempting.
I want to make a point about this, tempting, because so many people that I've spoken to, and I'm going to say including myself, have been triggered by, here it is, the new year. I was telling you, Ashley, that I have actually a very happy occasion. My daughter's getting married, and so I was trying on dresses. And I was a size that I didn't expect to be. I'm just going to say it. It happens. It happens to the best of us. Our bodies change. They shift. I don't know the last time that I ever had to try on a gown. I don't think I ever had to try on a gown. And my first thought, I'm just telling you this, a dietitian for, 30 years, my first thought was, oh my God, I have to change my food. It's like, oh my God. And I said, holy shit, if that's what the dietitian is thinking about, what are you all feeling out there in the real world? Like, This is scary. So you know what? I just accepted, okay, this is how my body is. I'm going to look beautiful that day, and I'm going to find something that makes me feel wonderful. But diet culture is everywhere, and their triggers around the corner everywhere.
Yeah. I have been really focusing on surrounding myself with things that don't trigger me. Mm-hmm. And not only don't trigger me, but support me. So I've been doing a lot of stuff on Instagram lately. That's just the platform I've chosen. And so, I've been doing a photo project that's really about like exploring my body image and embracing what I look like. And part of that is also, sorry?
I was going to say, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, I struggled with disordered eating basically my whole life, and then that developed into an eating disorder the second half of high school. Mm-hmm. And I probably recovered my last year of college and was exploring intuitive eating at that point. And I did a lot of body image work on the way because you sort of are forced to. Mm-hmm. But once I became weight stabilized, I wasn't challenged in my body image. as consistently. And this past summer, I gained some weight, and I realized that I was only really okay with my body as it was then, not past that point. So, you know, I mean, it's January, right? So it's taken some time, you know.
Well, you recognize your own potential weight bias.
Yeah, like. For sure. And, you know, because I think a lot of people can sort of relate to this idea that, like, you get used to your body, right? And so when it changes, that can be really triggering, and that's normal. I don't want to suggest that it's not, and that if you are triggered, you're doing something wrong, because you're not. But for me,
I just shared that I was triggered because my body had changed.
Right.
So,
but for me, I sort of was reflecting on the experience, and I was like, I don't want to feel that way again. And obviously, I can't stave off all those kinds of feelings, but what I can do is recognize that, hey, I have some more work to do in this sector of my life, and you know, I have the capacity to invest time and energy into it right now, so I'm going to. So, you know, part of that was going shopping. And finally venturing into the plus size section of the internet, because it's really not in stores, so mostly the internet. So it was a lot of trips to the post office, returning things that were the wrong size, and a lot of measuring myself with a measuring tape, and just figuring out the brands I liked, the brands that offered what I needed, and the size that I was in those brands. And from there, I started thinking, like, okay, so I've got these cool clothes, and I'm following all these really cool people on Instagram, because that was the other part of it, following a lot of people on Instagram who are focused on social justice and fat acceptance and just all those kinds of things, body image work, body positivity from a political viewpoint. And, you know, I was like, I wonder... because I've always been that person. I hate taking pictures, you know, and that's something we've talked about in the group before. Pictures are really fucking hard.
Pictures are very hard.
They're really hard. And so I was just like, I hate taking pictures, and I hate that I hate taking pictures. Like, I want to be able to look back on my year, for example. Like, I was looking back on my year, and there's barely any photos, you know, like I'm and that's not to say that, like, if you don't take pictures of your life, it doesn't exist, because I don't believe in that either. Like, I do believe that you should, like, be in the moment as much as you can. But there's also something to be said about, like, documenting the people that you love, you know?
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness.
And if you decide you can't be in that photo, then you don't have those mementos, right?
Yeah. Well, you're missing out on life. There's so many people that don't want to take pictures with their loved ones. They don't want to take pictures with their kids, you know. And you just think about all the time that you're missing out on, you know, the memories. You want to remember those things later on. Yeah. Right.
And so, you know, I remember when I first was doing recovery and body image work, I really pushed myself to be in the pictures, but I didn't want to look at them. And you know, there was still this just discomfort with it. And so serendipitously, my boyfriend actually also sort of started getting into photography, started getting into clothes, exploring that area as well. And so we sort of together embarked on this, like, photo project. And, you know, some pictures he takes, some pictures I take myself. You know, he also does his own thing on the side. But it's been really lovely, kind of just reaffirming to myself that my body is okay no matter what, basically. And sort of...
So you're taking photos and looking at them and taking them in?
Yep. And that's not to say that I'm happy with every photo. And of course, like, when it's something like Instagram, you get to edit it. You get to choose which one you want to put up. But I think there's really something interesting. Like, I'm much more comfortable with the photos that I take myself. And that's been a really interesting self-reflection process for me, because I can tell, like, so if my camera is faced front so that it's facing me and I can see it, and then I have the little remote in my hand, I can see what I look like on screen, and I can adjust the way that feels best for me. And then I can feel how my body feels in that position, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a really nice process of like almost taking control back over my body, instead of feeling like I'm being not even watched, but just like, it's like if someone else is on the other side of the camera, I feel much more vulnerable.
Absolutely, you're right. It's about that you don't have as much control.
Yeah. Whereas
But
when it's sort of like it's changing the way I'm thinking about the photos themselves, because you know, in general, so when someone's taking a picture of you and your loved one, like we were talking about before, someone's on the other side of the camera, and I'm hopeful to eventually get to a place where that feels comfortable too. But I think part of that starts with taking the self-photography back, right? And making sure you feel comfortable when it's just you in your skin, feeling the way you need to feel, right?
You know what? Absolutely. And I'm going to make a point about that, is that really from a lot of different angles, not just the angle that feels the most quote unquote flattering, because that's the problem with looking at Instagram accounts where, you know, with that Fitspo and all that stuff, you're seeing things that are photoshopped. You're seeing things that are photographed from, you know, angles that makes the person look smaller. And so I think it's really important to get used to all the angles of your body.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, like, you know, or as I mentioned, you know, like the photos I choose to upload are the ones that I like the most. And I'm hopeful that one day the photos that I like the most are the photos that maybe aren't going to be the ones that represent me in the most, you know, culturally, aesthetically pleasing, right? But that's a ways off. Okay. And so I think that like, that's sort of what this is about, you know, like it's about taking my body back, taking ownership of my self-image, right? And sort of exploring that and exploring what I'm comfortable with and then pushing that.
I like this, actually, the idea for a body image project to help some of the people we're working with become more comfortable in their bodies. So I'm glad you're doing it. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's just something I'm doing. So there's no timeline. There's no pressure, you know, it's not like, I mean, I think there's something to be said about like formal programs. Like I know Vivian McMaster is her name.
Yes.
Does the Be Your Own Beloved program, which is basically, I think, what I'm doing. I don't know. I've never taken the program, but it's about body image through photography.
It absolutely is, yes. And I will say that I signed up for the program and just didn't get a chance to do it. But I was
thought about it because it looks so sweet. You know?
It looks like a wonderful program, and I paid my money. I signed up for it. So, Vivian, if you're watching this, I'll take it another time. But I saw the assignments, and they're really right on line with what you were talking about, Ashley.
And I think that, you know, it's sort of, yes, there's something to be said about a directed program, but I also think it's kind of nice having that freedom, and sort of taking it in the direction that you want to take it. You know, like I'm also making sure that I'm supporting myself through this by following other people who are also committed to sort of my end game in like representing marginalized bodies and, you know, not posting the most flattering and, you know, or in bodies that we don't consider flattering, you know? So it's more than just taking the pictures, you know? It's about a bigger thing. But also taking the pictures is a lot of fun, and I'm really proud of them, and I think I look adorable. So
you should be, and you are adorable. And I want to make a point here is that we kind of started talking about, you know, it's January, diet culture. Here it is. You know, we're working on first letting go of diets. What you're talking about, Ashley, is really sort of an end game, which is feeling comfortable in your body, working on body image. And I think that people sometimes have the mistaken idea that, you know, when you immediately embrace intuitive eating, okay, you know, I don't feel good in my body yet. You know, when is that going to happen? And I want to remind everybody that it's such a process. You know, it can take years. You know, people work on their recovery. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a process. And bodies are changing. There's so many so many things that happen to your bodies that make them change. Childbirth. I mean, I can start first puberty, childbirth, menopause, other things happening, people perhaps getting sick and having changes in their physical levels of activity. There's so many factors that make a body change.
Yeah.
Just to realize, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I also think it's really important to remember that the target, like the target for recovery, the target for this process is always moving.
Yes.
Right? It's an ever moving target. So, like I said, when I was at that stable weight, which was really exciting for me because I'd been binging and restricting my whole life, I'd never been at a stable weight. And it was much higher than I wanted it to be when I first settled there. But I came to love that body and appreciate that body. I thought that body was like sexy and like I was really happy with my body. And then I wasn't, and part of that was the weight gain. And part of that was just stuff that I hadn't dealt with yet. It just was stuff, and I didn't realize,
Well, you weren't, for whatever reason, you hadn't been ready to deal with it or able to, whatever,
there yet.
Yeah, that's the point, that the journey takes time. And even if you feel like you've reached the place of being complete, you're not, because you're ever changing.
Right. And there's always new things to adjust to, as you were sort of just saying,
Well,
So
as I was in the dressing room, having to put on a gown in a size that I never in my life saw. So that's what I'm talking about. My postmenopausal body was different than the last time I bought something that was a fancy dress. So it's about change, accepting, being open. I'm looking at your dog. I want to just share something. This is totally off topic, but not really. Sorry, it's horrible. I went to a nature sanctuary on my vacation. It was more like a wildlife sanctuary, and I was obsessed. I mean, I'm obsessed actually with zoos and like animals. So this sanctuary had bears, it had lions, it had tigers, it had dogs, and people who bought exotic pets who end up realizing that they can't take care of them, they end up going to these kinds of places, these wildlife sanctuaries, and also, zoos who can't handle them or manage them, whatever. But I was so struck by looking at the wildlife in these cages. And I just kept staring at this lion, this beautiful, magnificent lion, staring back at me in this cage. And this is, again, because this is what I do. It's on my brain. It's like, you're in diet jail. You're like in diet jail. And then there was a show. The owner actually did all kinds of tricks with the lions, and all I kept thinking was, please don't be hungry. I was so scared that lion was going to take a giant bite out of this.
That's actually a really good point, because like when an animal is in a zoo, their diet is really monitored by somebody else, right? They're not allowed to hunt. They're not allowed to go find their food when they're hungry.
Right.
And because we live in a fat phobic society, like there's this belief that if your animal is like, sometimes you go to the vet. So people have talked about this before in various groups. They'll like get their dog fat shamed.
Absolutely. Oh my God, absolutely. It's true. Absolutely.
So, like, I'm sure they're hungry.
Well, my first thought seriously was, please, it is kids in this audience. And I just kept thinking, this lion, this man is in this, this arena, like this with a lion. And I just like, please don't eat the man, please, please. And I would, anyway, the point is, don't be hangry. Don't be too hungry, because that's diet jail. You will binge. And I didn't want the lion binging on this guy. It was such a really sort of, in that moment, such a good analogy to diet culture.
Yeah.
That's my little story of the day. Yeah, you get too hungry, you binge.
But yeah, so go follow me on Instagram, peeps.
Yep, follow Ashley on her body image journey.
Cozy Bae.
Cozy Bae. And what does that mean again? I know there was a reason for that.
So like I said, my boyfriend and I sort of started doing this at the same time. And he sort of came up with this moniker, and he wanted to use the term cozy. And so his is King Cozy. And he decided that he wanted me to have one that was related to it, which at first was separate, and that was Cozy Bae. And then I was just like, I can't manage 2 Instagram accounts, and I don't really care if it's anonymous. So I'm just going to make it my Instagram account.
It's good. And by the way, she helps me with my Instagram account, so follow that too. Erica Leon Nutrition. While you're at it, you'll get a lot of body positive messaging and anti-diet messaging. And speaking of that, there's a lot of exciting things coming up at Erica Leon Nutrition. Number one, there actually is right now, there's a free intuitive eating program that you can just join, and sort of, it's called dip your toe into intuitive eating, see what it is, see if it feels comfortable for you, see if it's your philosophy. And then I have an amazing program that Ashley was part of, which is called Intuitive Eating Basics. And it was an online live program that was recorded. And so it's available as an online course with lots of materials and information for you to learn about. And stay connected. More stuff is on the horizon. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, but stay tuned, guys. We're keep an ear out. We've got some cool stuff cooking.
Absolutely cool stuff cooking for the new year. So Ashley, I love your body positive journey, and I can't stop thinking about the lion in the cage. That's the diet jail. Diets don't work. Get out of jail. That's my advice for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end
on. I agree. So have a nice weekend, everyone.
All right, bye, y'all.
Next time, bye-bye.